Now that we know that we're live, welcome everyone. It's the Quantum Healing with Candace show. It is the 8th of February 2019, and I have been looking forward to this show with my dear friend Pamela Aaralyn for months now, and it is going to be Stephen Hawking, and we're going to talk about his book. And the book is Brief Answers to the Big Questions, but this is the 2019 update version, because we're going to be talking to Stephen through Pamela right now about what he thinks about all those answers that he has in this book with his name on it, and what he thinks about that now from his current position in the spirit realm. So welcome, Pamela.
Thank you for having me so much. It's such a pleasure, such an honor to be with you again.
Oh, it's so much fun to be with you too. For those of you who don't know Pamela, give us a brief introduction.
Yes, I'm a clear conduit channel, and I have been doing that since around age 5. So what that means is that I can be aware and conscious when speaking to spirits from beyond, and I speak to all sorts of beings of all varieties with no bias, and my goal is to remain unbiased in all of my channeling. And I just simply observe what comes through. You ask a question, I give you answers. I'm also a trance channel, but we're not going to be trancing today because I'm so curious. I want to be aware and hearing what he's saying. If I trance, I won't be aware.
That's great. That's great. So I took some notes from listening to a replay of the show that Pamela did with the A-Team, which is the Ascension team, which has Dolores Cannon, Nikola Tesla, Albert Einstein, I already said Nikola Tesla, Masaru Emoto, and now Stephen Hawking. And we did this show March 17th of last year. And it was just a handful of days after Stephen had passed. And wow, what a weekend that was with you, Pamela.
Yeah, and that's another thing that happens as a multidimensional channel. I can talk to multiple beings, sometimes hundreds at a time, and they sort of flock in, and I have to treat them a little bit like kindergartners and say, okay, no, you first, you have the talking stick, and stop talking, you're going into the corner for a bit. And yeah, it's a very busy life for a channel.
It was very busy just being there as a guest in your lovely home. So for those of you who haven't seen this show and who are watching this one or watching a replay of this one, that show is on Pamela's channel. Again, it was broadcast March 17th of 2018. And my gosh, that's got a lot of views. It had almost like 42,000 views, which of course is perfect. The number 42 always, of course. And for those of you who are interested in this whole subject, I would recommend you watch that. But that video had more than just Stephen in it. It had all 5 players. And today we're just focusing on Stephen. And so the story is how this even worked is I was traveling last year, was walking through an airport, and this book practically fell off the bookshelf in the Atlanta airport while I was eating lunch. And I ended up texting Pamela asking her if I bought the book and read it, would she do this show with me? And so she said, yeah, it sounded like fun. So that's what we're doing today. And in this book, and I'm going to take the cover off because it's making some noise, but I've actually marked some places in here. I don't know if we'll get through all of this, but what we're really going to do here is we're going to ask Stephen now the same questions that he answered for people in this book. And this book was published after his death, right? It was published sometime in 2018 after his death, and his death was in spring of 2018. So, but in here are 10 questions. And so let me just say what the 10 questions are in case we don't get through them all. I'm sure there's going to be some that we spend more time on than others, but the 10 questions are, he starts with the big one, is there a God? Then he moves to, how did it all begin? Number 3 is there intelligent life in the universe? Number 4, can we predict the future? Number 5, what is inside a black hole? Number 6, is time travel possible? Number 7, will we survive on Earth? Number 8, should we colonize space? 9, will artificial intelligence, we'll call that AI from here on out, outsmart us? And number 10 is, how do we shape the future? And before we even get started here, for those science-minded people who might be tuning in out of sheer curiosity to watch this video, even this book, which is, written for the public, was very difficult for me to comprehend. There were many theories and bits of information in here that simply were quite difficult for me. And I'm no schlep. I've got my master's degree. I'm just not science-minded. And so if I in any way kind of disrespect the world of science by the way I phrase something, or if I misstate something, please accept my apologies in advance. I believe that both Pamela and I have nothing but the greatest respect for Stephen. And I want to thank him and those followers of his who still support his work and who may even be watching this. Pamela, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I do. I want to let the scientific community know that, much like Candace, I would say that I understand a little bit more of what he's saying because he pesters me about it, and he is insistent, and he's a bit of a workaholic still from this standpoint. And I also want to say that while I am beginning to understand what he's saying, I did not read this book. As an unbiased channel, I don't research. I don't read books in advance. I have never researched his work because I prefer to remain unbiased, and there are times when I will misstate something based upon what I think is happening, and he'll just step right in and correct me. So the way that I work as a clear conscious channel is that I am conscious and present for what he is saying, and it's similar to mediumship. I'm also a physical medium. So he will come into the room. I actually see him standing to the right of my computer screen. I see in ways that most psychics do not. I don't see form. I see gravitational waves and interesting things. And that's one of the reasons why he chose me, is because I see energy and I see the things that he's talking about in a different way. And I understand them when he speaks my language. So he tends to incorporate more of my language in channeling a little bit so that I understand that he is stating and speaking in some facets and in some mannerisms that I don't understand still. So thank you for your patience in advance. And please know that I haven't read the book. I haven't done my research. And I did that purposely so that I could give you unbiased information.
Great. All right. So what I'm going to do is just kind of go through this book, and I'm going to go through where I've marked things. And I'm going to read things out loud, and we're going to just get Stephen's perspective about what he's written here and what he might like to say about that. And I've written some questions and underlined some things, etc. So first of all, I would like to very much thank you, Mr. Hawking, for spending some time with both Pamela and I today.
He says you're welcome. It wasn't her choice. I want to say that another thing that is really important for you to know is that while I can call upon beings to come into my field, I normally don't. Much like with Dolores and Emoto, Newton has come, Einstein is a part of the team that I talk to as well. They find me. It's not vice versa. Yeah. So he we had completely different plans when Candace visited my home not too long ago last year. We did not plan to channel this team of scientists, and he was not a part of this team at this point. And very, very shortly after his passing, he was there in a way that I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I was pacing around the house. I was just trying to remain stable in a lot of insomnia while he pestered me about channeling. So I'm here, and it's not exactly my choice to be here, but I am enjoying what he has to say.
Great. Super. Okay, so in the introduction of this book, Stephen, you wrote in the very first page, I have spent my life traveling across the universe inside my mind. And it was such a beautiful sentence. And I would like to know, As you travel across the universe now, how close was your mind to what is actually out there?
My mind is no longer involved. There's a stark difference between the mind of the human race and the mind of what you call God, which is lacking in what you would believe as a personality. God is energy. God is the infinite nothingness.
Great, thank you. So, and I'm still going to ask a few questions before we get to the questions about your life, because of course we're human. We're still embodied in the physical, and there are many questions that we have. Last time we talked, you were still very private. You had just passed away, or passed on to the spirit realm, I should say. And we didn't talk too much about your family, but if any family members are listening today, I do want them to know how much we honor and respect Stephen. And we do this out of our form of honor and respect, and we do not mean at all to disrespect him or you by doing a show like this. So I want to start with that. Now, where exactly, when you were alive, Stephen, did your ideas come from?
Much like information that is collected and dispersed when radiation is dispelled upon the entrance and exit of black holes, I still don't know.
You know,
it comes and it goes, he said.
You've got a sense of humor.
Comes and it goes, and it comes randomly at inopportune moments, at which point my family did not always approve of these moments at the point in time when they would come.
That's a really interesting answer. Thank you so much. Briefly, I want to acknowledge and talk about your physical condition, the ALS that you had. In the last channeling, you were talking about choosing this life because it was a mind-focused life and not a body-focused life. But I wondered if you could possibly restate that a little bit for those who hadn't seen the previous channeling, and or if you have any message to others who may be experiencing and challenged with this condition right now. What might you say to them?
You would need to understand the packets of accumulated memory that is dispersed from the God mind into your mind, from the spine, generated thoroughly up into the brain. You did not have accessibility, but please don't feel as if you are some genetic flaw. Just because you did not have accessibility to the wide range of DNA that the God mind offers. Hold on, I'm just figuring something out. You're the reason my spine hurts. Sorry, I get shocked sometimes because I did not know this. I thought it was due to a yoga injury that happened about a week and a half ago, and he was trying to tell me something for about a week and a half that I'm just now understanding about information carried through the base of the spine, and it's released into the brain, and the way that the spine is the seat of the knowledge of the God mind is what he's calling it.
Wow.
And it affected his spine in his time as well, in his struggle with ALS. And I have been having an intense pain in a certain portion of my spine that I thought all along was my neck, and it isn't. It's like the bottom middle of my spine, and I'm just now understanding what's going on.
Why would you be experiencing that? Simply because you are connected to his energy, or because he wants you to feel this for some reason?
Souls are aligned, and those information packets that are shared can be shared within those families because of those etheric genetics and the etheric DNA that he did not understand, which he thought was strictly physical at that time. And now he has deeper understanding, he claims, of how it is not strictly physical. So in other words, there is likely a more scientific, he would like to call it a more scientific version of me that is trying to be remembered from God mind information and packets of information. And it was something that he learned about the information that is accumulated, dispersed, and then what he believed would be destroyed or lost after radiation causes a problem with information that goes into black holes. So that information is DNA. And when a person who is multidimensional has parallel access to various dimensional existences, there is a degree of DNA shift that happens very literally from the spine all the way up to the brain.
Which is interesting because, of course, you know, this is what we often refer to, that movement, as Kundalini and Kundalini rising. And
we do. And he said, I'm trying to understand your fancy terms for such scientific information. It all has a scientific basis. Cheers.
Cheers.
As a Kundalini yogi, I just have to disagree with him there. I don't think they're fancy terms. I love my terms. But,
it's been around for a while, actually, right?
Yes, yes, it's been around. This yogic information has been science and has been proven by science for quite some time. He and I have had a plethora of conversations about this. Many arguments, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun hearing about your conversations with all of these fellows, and of course with Dolores. Okay, so I'm wondering who. Well, let's see. Can you describe your actual transition just briefly for us? As you were getting ready to leave your physical form, what was that like for you? What surprised you about the actual transition, if anything?
It surprised me that there was something, you call it spirit, you call it soul, you call it what you will, but there was something about my essence that could exude beyond physical form.
And this surprised you?
Yes.
Good. Yeah, we're going to get into that a little bit later, but I wonder how that surprise has shifted or changed and I know there's no time where you are, but now that it's had more experience or, you know, more chance to explore where you are now since that moment, not just a handful of days when we last spoke with you directly like this, what has surprised you about living in the spirit realm?
I had instantaneous recollection, instantaneous memories of everything that is happening simultaneously throughout various existences. And remember when I stated in my book that it was a coincidence that Galileo was born at a certain time? It's not. And that was one of my memories. He is
wow.
A portion of me and I of him.
Beautiful.
It surprised me that we could share DNA from a level that's beyond physicality. It surprised me that DNA is beyond physicality.
Can you repeat that last sentence just because I didn't hear you, Pamela?
It surprised me that DNA is beyond physicality.
So does that mean that from your current expression, DNA is a part of that expression still?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It didn't begin and it didn't end. Nothing begins, nothing ends.
Yeah, we're going to get into that a little bit later, the steady state, but that's in a couple chapters ahead. I wonder if you might answer this one personal question. Did you have anyone come to greet you, or who was the first personality that you actually had an interchange with after you transitioned, if you would care to share that?
I never believed that anything was a personality. But now I understand that it is limited to form. There isn't much personality beyond form. That is a vision, a perception that you have in what you call reality. The first being that I could recognize was Galileo.
Perfect. So I will try to use that correct term. First being was Galileo. How beautiful is that? Wow, thank you so much. Okay, so I'm at the first page of the first chapter, which has the biggest question, of course, is there a God? And before you answer that question or respond to me asking that question, in the previous interview, I just wanted to remind our listeners that you had said this. You said this incredible thing. It was probably my favorite part of the last interview. the thing that prepared you the most to understand God was being an atheist. It's such a fabulous sentence. I wonder if you might respond to that statement that you made last year.
And I can answer the question again, if it pleases you.
Yes.
God isn't personal. Atheists understand this concept. God is an indescribable force of energy. It isn't God that created matter. When I say God, I mean to describe an infinite nothingness. An atheist can understand that, even though they have a limited scope.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's really interesting to me to hear some of this, because often in this community, the spiritual community that we are in, we talk about bridging science and spirituality. And here we are kind of bridging spirituality and atheism, which it's just a lovely thing for me to consider anyway. I'm not sure how the atheist down the street might think of that. Because I think some humans, or a lot of humans, simply think that atheism means the same thing as the end of existence and nothing existing afterwards, and that your beingness wouldn't survive physical transition. I think that's maybe partly what the disconnect is.
That is the limited scope, yes.
All right.
Something began and something will now end.
So in this book, some of the best questions are on this page, I think. And that's page 29 of this book. You say in the book that asking if God exists is a valid question for science. Is it still a valid question? And what would you say to the science community about exploring that question with the science mind?
All unlimited questions are valid. It was the nature of my entire being, was to question everything. And now that I have no further questions, I urge you to continue what you believed were my questions.
So you don't have any further questions?
I have no further questions.
Why don't you have further questions?
Within the infinite nothingness of which I was fascinated during that era, all the answers lie on the other side of what you thought was a black hole.
Okay. Also on page 29, you say, I think the universe was spontaneously created out of nothing, according to the laws of science. How would you rephrase that sentence today?
Something, and you are the thing, cannot come from nothing. God's thought created a sound which reverberated and created all beingness simultaneously. And you call this a bang, a big bang. Those beings are you. You created this universe, not God.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm going to just keep going. On page 36, how would you answer this now? How does God's existence fit into your understanding of the beginning and the end of the universe? And if God was to exist and you had the chance to meet him, what would you ask him?
He's talking too much for me to understand. Can we just ask one question within that at a time?
Yes. Yes. Well, so we talked about the beginning of the universe. What about the end?
There's no beginning. What you saw begin was time. Time cannot be birthed. Death is not the end. Neither time nor time nor death can be birthed. Neither time nor death are a beginning or an end. As time only exists in your perception of reality, in the essence of infinite nothingness, time cannot exist. But when God's thought reverberated from a word, from a sound that created all beings, those beings being you, you began to dream. And you began to believe. And you began to create. And within these concepts are birth and death. Time only exists in your perspective and in your perceptions.
We're definitely going to talk more about time a little later too. The second part of this question, though, is that personality thing that you currently reject about God being a personality. But I'm going to go ahead and ask this question because it's in the book. If God were to exist and you had the chance to meet him, what would you ask him?
God doesn't exist. And God is formless, birthless, deathless, timeless. I met myself.
All right, thank you. This page 38 really has some of your human personality come through in it, for me anyway. You wrote the sentence, when people ask me if a God created the universe, I tell them that the question itself makes no sense because time didn't exist before the Big Bang, so there is no time for God to make the universe in. Now, you've just answered that, but how would you rephrase that now? When people ask if a God created the universe, you tell them that the question itself makes no sense.
It's futile, this chasing of your tail. Humans are going around in circles, as usual, believing that there is a beginning and an end to something. And then if that were true, what need would there be to question anything? Your questioning is your creativity. And when you find all your answers, what then?
You say that the simplest explanation, you say this in the book, there is no God. No one created the universe. No one directs our fate, which is another interesting little bit of line in there. This leads me to a profound realization. There's probably no heaven and afterlife either. I think belief in an afterlife is just wishful thinking because there's no reliable evidence for it. And yet that's where you are now.
There's no place to go. And there's no beginning from which you arise. You can't call it an after anything. There is no premortal existence. There is no afterlife. Everything is life at the same time when you transcend your notions of time.
That's difficult for humans to do, but we're going to try to explore that a little bit here today. Yes, so it's a good thing that we're ending or stopping there for a moment on time, because the next one is, how did it all begin? And of course you've said there is no beginning, there is no ending. But
time began.
Yes, okay.
And it is a valid question.
Okay.
And within the thought from the mind of what you call God, there was a thought, there was a sound, it reverberated. It created beingness and the essence of beingness, and that is you. And everything was created simultaneously thereafter when you decided that you wished for matter. Sound created matter.
I remember you saying that in the last channeling. So I've underlined a sentence you wrote on page 45. As far as we can tell, the universe goes on in space forever and is much the same no matter how far it goes on. How would you respond to that sentence now?
I've had a taste of expansion. How can anything be the same? God expands. God learns through beingness of form. And when light meets the void of which you call sound, there is much to expand from. And while the nothingness of God is unchangeable, immutable, indescribable, and always will be unchangeable, you create a perception of things changing through your desire to expand and contract. You are perpetually expanding and contracting. Everything is still. Everything is in motion. God is the stillness. You are the motion. You work hand in hand.
That's an interesting thing to say as far as your negative energy and positive energy thoughts in the book. But is the universe forever? Is it expanding forever? Infinitely?
Yes. You are nothing and everything simultaneously. Continue your questions.
Thank you. Oh, I have a million of them. Look at all those on here. On page 47, you say that you think that the universe probably started 10 to 15 billion years ago. Do you agree with that timetable right now in the human perspective?
From the perspective of time, we can go much further back.
Interesting. Wow. Okay, great. And what happened? So are we, was that because, well, I'll let you tell me. Why? Why can we go much further back?
The macro did not create the micro or vice versa. What if they exist simultaneously within packets of information contained in what you call time? I'll call them modules, if you will. If there was one single thought of an organism, one single thought of life, then evolution is true, and the theories of evolution are true, the theories of Darwin are true, and much beyond. It's a very limited scope. What if you could think beyond what you believe is time in your notions? Information did not begin. Creation did not begin where you thought it did, and it doesn't matter.
It's a big question.
I mean that quite literally. It doesn't matter. It's not about matter or form.
I definitely got that inference. On the same page where you say that, page 47, you begin to talk a little bit about the steady state theory. And I'm going to go ahead and read what you wrote here. The steady state theory is galaxies moved apart. The idea was that new galaxies would form from matter that was supposed to be continually being created throughout space. The universe would have existed forever, would have looked the same at all times. This last property had the great virtue of being a definite prediction that could be tested by observations. But you go on to say that that theory was discarded and abandoned, but you brought it up in the last channeling. What would you have to say about steady state theory now?
I would say that I now know it is metaphor. Of course, God doesn't change. The infinite nothingness cannot change. But I was thinking too literally in those moments and conceptions and theories.
On page 52, you start talking about Einstein, which is so much fun to think about you two exchanging information.
We no longer argue about it.
On page 52, you say that Einstein objected strongly to the idea that the universe is governed by chance. His feelings were summed up by his dictum, a very famous phrase, God does not play dice. What's your reaction to that statement now?
Of course it does. And while I don't mean to bring him into this conversation, he is now here with his instant monogamous essence. They're going to fight. I thought you said you didn't anymore. Um, he said, it isn't about relativity. It isn't about gravitational waves. It isn't about gravity at all. You aren't form. And Einstein says, while I can agree with these concepts, it's about entanglement. And that definitely still relates. Pun intended, he stated.
Of course.
I don't get these jokes. I'm a quantum physics flunky, apparently, they said.
Oh boy. Okay. On page 53, you say this idea that the universe has multiple histories may sound like science fiction, but is now accepted as science fact. Now, those of us in this community don't see anything hard to swallow about that at all. Different timelines and different realities, and multiple timelines and different fractals. What do you have to say about that now?
There's something I wish to address again about Hawking radiation. Remember, I now believe that the information that goes into a black hole cannot be lost. Nothing is ever lost. Nothing is ever new. It's only something that seems as such in your limited dimensional accessibility. The information simply moves into other dimensions and is shifted in the experience that you call death or transition, and then is remembered once more as if it is new. But it is the same reality that is simply expanded upon. It is simply no longer accessible to those of you who are remembering in form.
Interesting.
And many beings now, one of whom I am speaking with now, can access multidimensional DNA patterns and then bring it into their form. And this is the greatest level of what you call an awakening, which I like to call a remembering.
Beautiful. And I think you're meeting
contract.
Perfect.
He and I have many discussions in our brief time together with he in spirit and I in form, because I like to bring what he teaches me and what I already know in my multidimensional accessibility, and what humans call past lives or whatever in the spiritual communities, parallel existences, if you will. You know, when Dolores and I talk, he likes to help me understand how to bring that into form. And we've had various conversations about accessing DNA packets that are very physical. You know, science calls this junk DNA, you know, but he doesn't believe that it is at this stage in his existence. He thinks that I'm some interesting experiment.
On page 56, you say, it may be that intelligent beings can evolve without galaxies and stars, but it seems unlikely. What do you have to say to that statement?
Since I didn't read the book, can you repeat it again?
Yes. It may be that intelligent beings can evolve without galaxies and stars, but it seems unlikely.
Of course it's unlikely. Evolution begins when you create time. This is the nature of your creative expansion, your expansion and contraction. God is the contraction. You are the expansion. What's in between? We call that the black hole. We call that many things that I love to spend my time studying in form. And the black hole is a portal to each of these components of God essence.
Interesting. Okay, so now here is where the biggest apologies to the science community for me need to come in.
We now owe them many.
I'm so sorry, but I am going to ask about this and just sort of see what comes up. And what I'm going to talk about is M theory. And you say M theory is our best candidate for complete unified theory, which allows a very large number of possible histories for the universe. What's M theory, and what do you think of it now? And does it have any relevance to what's actually going on?
It's bringing you back to the relativity and the nature of entanglement. And when you bring time into this theory, a lot can shift, a lot can change. This theory cannot be proven or disproven. It always is.
All right, well, we are...
He's continuing. At this point, I understand that it could help you transcend all of the chaos within mortality. You perceive time as chaos. Why do you believe that it owns you, that you must live by it as if it is a law that is immutable?
Well, you did when you were in a body, I think. Why did you believe it then?
Einstein said touche.
Hey, buddy. You're my guy, Albert. Okay, so we're actually on chapter 3 now. Let's see if we can get going. This one is there life? Is there other intelligent life in the universe? Stephen starts out making a joke about whether or not there's intelligent life on Earth. But the question is, yes, is there intelligent life out there?
What if I were to tell you that when you remember, that intelligence, once accessed, is stored within your very essence, in your brain, in your spine? What if I were to tell you that you are that intelligence and you simply have forgotten? It's not about looking elsewhere to anything that exists somewhere else. What if you are that?
Beautiful. So you've already spoken on evolution, but I have this underlined, and it's an interesting statement. It has taken us several million years to evolve from less advanced earlier apes. During that time, the useful information on our DNA has probably changed by only a few million bits. So the rate of biological evolution in humans is about a bit a year. What do you think of that statement now?
Your spiritual communities prove that wrong. The rate at which you are expanding in your nature with your vibrational frequencies within your emotions are proving that wrong. Science has yet to keep up. Catch up, science.
Thank you. Okay, so here throughout the book, there are some quotes and questions that are answered that are highlighted, and some of them I'm reading for Stephen to answer again. Here's one. If intelligent life exists somewhere else than on Earth, would it be similar to the forms we know or different?
You have no capacity or reference point to understand that life is beyond form. When you do, then perhaps we can have this discussion.
Thank you. Okay. Here's something interesting you talk about as you continue to talk about DNA. You say on page 81, nevertheless, I am sure during this century, people will discover how to modify both intelligence and instincts like aggression, I guess by altering DNA. What do you think about that kind of work right now?
I wish that I had the realization in my ventures in that era, in this experiencing, that it was about the modulation of emotional frequency. I wish that I had expanded into that knowing.
How likely is it that any scientists will. They seem to consider that not the realm of science at all.
He pointed to Emoto and said, and he began that.
Wow. The A-team's all there just quiet, right?
Yeah, no matter what.
It's like they have a continuous party. Thank you so much. Okay. Okay. So one more question.
He wanted to answer your question.
Excuse me?
He wanted to answer your question, and he said it's not a matter of assuming that all of the human race will understand simultaneously. You are deeply in experiential creativity. Some will understand and come to this realization, and many won't. But you are in a new era. It's changing rapidly. The numbers are increasing of those who are remembering.
Is that why you and the A-team stick around and interact with us?
Yes. You still have hope.
Thank you. On page 83, you say, by the way, I discount suggestions that UFOs contain beings from outer space. I think that any visits by aliens would be much more obvious and probably also much more unpleasant. What do you say to that statement written in your book?
I will say for you to go deeper and read between the lines. How would I even know at that time that something would be pleasant or not to comment?
Yeah.
Of course I know. Of course your government knows. And I will not say further.
Thank you. You do say on page 85 that you believe that there are other forms of intelligent life out there that we've been overlooked, but I think you just answered that question.
It's not out there. You look from Earth and you're looking for a point of relativity, a particular map of the stars, and then physically speaking, the Earth is spinning. So is it not ever changing? How will you ever know where you are if you continue to look up and not in? How will you ever know who you are if you continue to look out and not in and not through? The black holes bring you through something. And this was my fascination with them. What's on the other side? Well, I am.
Wonderful.
Pun intended, Einstein said.
Perfect. Okay, we're up to question 4. Can we predict the future?
Why are you still so focused on what is not here?
Hey, you wrote the book, not me. I think the predict the future one for most people who are involved in the metaphysical spiritual movement would kind of shrug about that one.
Einstein just went like this on his bottom and went.
Oh, how fun. It's interesting that in this...
He wants to answer your question.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thought he was done.
Einstein interrupted him, he said. And when he recovered from the burn, now he wishes to continue. He says we can go into all quantitative values about numbers and predictions, and math is always going to tell you something. But why are you thinking about something and some where and some how and when? Your answers are now. When I meant you are all that is, I did not mean to limit you. He raised his eyebrow. Channeling means that I did too.
He did have
I see him outside of myself, that's why I talk, but I don't view him as that. I view when he speaks to me, it's actually just coming through my form and the words just come out simultaneously as he speaks. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting because I'll look at him in his alleged form across from me and then I notice all the funny things he's doing.
You talk a lot about scientific law in the book, and in the last channeling, I wrote down a quote that you said that the scientific method is a limited mind perspective.
Yes.
But we, the culture, hold the concept of the scientific method up in such high regard. How will we ever change that or modify it from what it is right now?
As long as you are thinking from limited mind, and that is the egoic perspective of evidential research and the need to prove, then you go nowhere. You stand still. You prove and disprove each other's theories time and time and time again. And then what?
That was the game.
It has been the game. Are you ready to be done with it?
But you guys are still arguing where you are. Isn't that somewhat continuing the game?
Simply to catalyze you. We play your games. You insist upon it. You call, we're there.
I love it.
You dream, we dream with you.
All right. Well, this is going to be an interesting chapter. What's inside a black hole? And in the last channeling, you were talking about that was one of the first things that you did. And if you would go ahead and repeat what you said before, or repeat your experience of what that was when you realized you were disembodied and able to take your beingness anywhere, I guess, and you went to a black hole. How did you find it, and what happened?
That is my first exploration beyond what you call form. I wanted to know what was on the other side. I wanted to know what happens and if radiation will disperse the information packets, which I now understand that the information that is pulled in and then dispersed, and then what I would believe would explode thereafter and be lost, that information is your DNA. Those are the memory packets that follow through from experience to experience in creation. Therefore, every time information goes through a black hole, another being is, well, what you believe is born.
Wow. So that's how we all were born, an information packet that went through a black hole?
Yes. And that is how you all continue. And that is how you all expand. You contract again when you forget. You return to what you call the God mind, this infinite nothingness. You merge with Source. And then those memory packets are activated again through another experience. What you think is light is not. When you see the light, when you die, that begins your travel.
If it's not light, what is it?
It's darkness.
Why do we see it as
nothingness?
Why do we see it as light?
Because when you merge with God, God is that. When you merge with what you call God, it is the light. And when creativity begins, then there is darkness. You perceive God as light because God cannot perceive itself. God in essence is infinite nothingness, which can only be perceived as dark.
Thank you. I'm going to take you back to a scientific concept here I would like you to comment on, please. On page 105, you say, Penrose proposed the cosmic censorship conjecture, which is that all singularities formed by the collapse of stars or other bodies are hidden from view inside of black holes. A black hole is a region where gravity is so strong light cannot escape. The cosmic censorship conjecture is almost certainly true because a number of attempts to disprove it have failed. What do you have to say about the cosmic censorship conjecture? Now,
I would not say that it is censorship. I would not use that word at this point. I would say it is the laws, the immutable laws of all universal experiencing. Of course, if you were to view everything simultaneously, you cannot handle such remembering. You hold no reference point to remember that you are that which you call God.
We are continuing to ask questions in the black hole chapter. Okay. All right, so another concept you talk about in the book is scientific determinism, which is the laws of science determine the evolution of the universe. What would you like to say to that statement now?
Belief determines the evolution of the universe.
Yep.
And you call that science. But when you believe something, you become determined enough to prove and disprove over and over again. So what does that mean to your laws now?
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, and the very next page, I put 3 stars and did a lot of circling over here. I think for me this seemed important. Page 119. It was therefore very important to determine whether information really was lost in black holes or whether in principle it could be recovered. Many scientists felt that information should not be lost, but for years no one suggested a mechanism by which it could be preserved. This apparent loss of information was known as the information paradox, and it's troubled scientists for the last 40 years. It still remains one of the biggest unresolved problems in theoretical physics. So for those looking at that problem in theoretical physics, what would you say to them now about this information paradox?
I would say that we've moved beyond the Hawking radiation theory. And I would also say that information is not lost. I will repeat again. You are operating on a principle that something is there and then suddenly isn't, when nothing can be created and nothing can be destroyed. So you're looking for something that is always there. You perceive it and then you don't. This is a universal law of reflection. You simply do not have dimensional accessibility to certain realms because you cannot fathom them. Mm-hmm. And you must know this at some level in your DNA packets. At some level of memory, you know this, and you have a certain construct, a certain belief system, and you limit yourself to that. So I'd say that this is, again, going back to the incessant tail chasing.
We do this for expansion of our consciousness and our soul and continue to experience, correct?
Yes, and now you're at a point where you no longer need to expand from something so simple.
Thank you. All right, we're up to 6. Is time travel possible? Now, you've already discussed that a little bit, but there's a couple of quotes in here I definitely want to talk about anyway.
Wait, let me express how you believe that you're going to go somewhere that you already are. Now you can proceed.
Thank you. Actually, I love this. This may be one of my favorite things that I read in here. I really didn't know this. So is there any point in hosting a party for time travelers? Would you hope anyone would show up? So you actually did this. In 2009, you held a party for time travelers in your college for a film about time travel. To ensure that only genuine time travelers came, I didn't send out the invitations until after the party. On the day of the party, I sat in the college hoping, but no one came. I was disappointed, but not surprised. So what I want to know is, you sat in the college and you were disappointed. Were you surrounded by any beings at all? Like maybe Einstein? I just love this story, but what do you think about all of that now?
I believe that there's a nature of limitation within the human construct of the mind when operating strictly from beliefs by attempting to disprove them first. I was operating within the future. I am and was somewhat limited to that concept. I am still in between these worlds.
Mm-hmm.
I still have not impeccably transcended this theory that the future always is and cannot be changed. I'm still observing. I'm still learning, although not informed. There are many stages of this expansion. It is not as if you release yourself from that form, the human form, transcend it and go straight into nothingness. You only do that temporarily to remember. And you call this various things and relate it to places as if it's somewhere to go.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is always perfect.
So you did do this hosting of the party to try to disprove it?
Absolutely. Cynical science, if you will.
Okay. All right. Well, my dogs seem to be interested in everything now for some reason. They're laying so quietly over there for a minute. I'm going to let them out. Just a second. Here, dogs, let's go outside.
He wants her to keep them.
I'm sorry about that, but it is so cold outside. It's like 10 and everything's covered in ice. So I had them laying by the fire. So pardon that interruption. Okay, there's only one more time travel question. In conclusion, rapid space travel and travel back into time can't be ruled out according to our present understanding. They would cause great logical problems though. So let's hope there's a protection law, excuse me, to prevent people from going back and killing their parents. But science fiction fans need not lose heart. There's still hope for M theory. And I don't know if you have anything to say about that, but that's how you ended the time travel.
That was a limitation based upon belief in death, based upon belief that someone could begin something or end it. In this case, a life. In this case, that alleged harm could be done.
I think what humans are interested in is they're wondering, can they take their physical form and actually insert it?
No, because you don't believe that you can. As long as you continue to believe and formulate entire constructs of time and creative expansion based upon belief, then you will limit yourself.
So nobody can do that now. No human can believe this and no human can do this now.
There are some that do. They're expanding from the DNA packets currently in their spines and brains. But it is very difficult and it is very tenuous and tragic for them to attempt to hold form.
Wow. And do they tend to be mystics, these are spiritual people? These are gurus? Who are these people?
You call it that. They have a deeper understanding of the science of breath. You've called them yogis. You've called them many things.
Thank you. All right. So we're just a little past an hour of the show, and we're at question 7. So let's finish up, shall we? Question 7 is, will we survive on Earth?
It's such a limited question. Some of you believe in the chaotic theory of mortal chaos. Therefore, you create it and you won't. At least your form won't. Some of you believe in accessibility to multi-dimensions, and therefore you already are surviving. And you are already born, and you cannot desist. You simply remember that you are there. It's no longer relevant to be in this dimension, and when that is the case for you in your expansion, you will primarily operate from the fractal of your nature that is in a parallel existence with full accessibility to all of the things that you call gifts or psychic abilities. It's all science in these other parallel realms. It's all commonplace where I am.
Mm-hmm. One of the highlighted questions in this chapter is on page 159. What is the biggest threat to the future of this planet? And you answer an asteroid collision. But then you talk about global warming after that. Now, you mentioned global warming in the last channeling, but what is the biggest threat to the future of this planet from your current perspective?
Chaotic, limited belief systems are your biggest threat. You create everything that you fear, and you believe that fear is just as powerful as that which transcends it. That is tragic.
And those belief systems go across the board. They're spiritual, they're scientific, they're in all the different communities that are human, correct? I mean, we don't, we all sort of participate in that still from your perspective.
Yes.
Okay, I think we're going to quickly move on to chapter 8. Should we colonize space?
Who's to say and what's to say that you already haven't or have? It's not a matter of should.
You actually said here on page 169, I was quoted at the time as saying, I feared the human race is not going to have a future if we don't go into space. I believed it then and I believe it still.
And within that belief system, for many who still believe that, that will be a dire reality.
Dire because we will colonize space or won't?
You will. And it saddens me to tell you that you don't have to. You don't have to keep looking upward and outward. It's not a matter of going somewhere else.
I think if I knew you were going to say anything today, it was going to be that.
Of course.
Thank you. I'm going to skip that next question. Okay. All right. So we now are chapter 9. Will artificial intelligence outsmart us? That's a big concern for a lot of people. On page 184, you say, if computers continue to obey Moore's law, which is doubling their speed and memory capacity every 18 months, the result is that computers are likely to overtake humans in intelligence at some point in the next 100 years. Do you think we're still on that track?
Some of you are. Belief is tragic. Again, I'll answer it in a similar way. As per the prior answer and the prior question, it's the same.
Mm-hmm.
When are you done with fear? Can it be now?
In this writing, you were pretty pro artificial intelligence. You actually even make a joke about it. Here, I even wrote it down. AI joke. On page 193. I'm going to love this book in the future when I look back and think about this show. You say, you were asked the question, why are we so worried about artificial intelligence? Surely humans are always going to be able to pull the plug. And the joke is, people asked a computer, is there a God? And the computer said, there is now, and fused the plug. I don't know if there's going to be any comment to that joke, but it had to be said, I think.
What if your brain is that computer and you are simply replaying based upon the universal laws of reflection, that notion, that theory, by creating another being outside of yourself because you believe that separation exists?
There's a lot of intermingling between technology and the human form. You actually say on page 194, I believe the future of communication is brain-computer interfaces, electrodes on the skull, and implants. You know, your life benefited a lot from electronic devices, allowing you to participate and engage in the world. But there's a lot of us who don't really like this idea of implants and being physically connected to computers. What do you have to say about that?
Your fear of such can be just as devastating because you create such realities. And then there are those who expand within technology and with it, alongside it, and benefit greatly.
I think there's a concern that once you interface with physical components like computer parts, that it's easier to be sort of taken over or controlled by another.
And where would that notion come from if not fear?
I'm
Why
sure
does the notion of control even exist?
I'm sure it does come from fear. What if the notion simply was that of boundaries instead?
Why would that be necessary if fear were not so prevalent in your societies? It's one matter if for a creative existence, a unique creative existence, you instill what you call a boundary, a separation, if you will. But there is oneness within everything, even your notion of separation. It is quite another thing for you to instill what you call a boundary in order to have a unique creative experience because you fear that you would not do so otherwise and that your power could be infringed upon or taken.
Well, we certainly interact and live with technology now. Even what we're doing right now, of course, wouldn't be happening without it. So certainly a place for it. So thank you. Okay, how do we shape the future, and then a conclusion. So in this chapter of how do we shape the future, you actually make a list of things, the trends you see and the emerging problems, and the problems that you saw as some of the, and this may be a little bit of a repeat from what you said earlier, that you see as one of the greatest on page 203, global warming, finding space and resources for the massive increase in the Earth's human population, rapid extinction of other species, the need to develop renewable energy sources, degradation of the oceans, the deforestation and epidemic diseases are things to focus on as some of the biggest problems. What might you say about that?
Are you going to focus on the problem, or are you going to be inventive, resourceful, and begin to create the solution?
Don't you have to look at the problem to come up with a solution?
I have never advised avoiding the problem. Quite the opposite. But you become the saviors that you continue to believe that you require.
Good enough, thank you. Let's see. I'm going to skip that question. We already answered it. You also talk about the future to look for other planets to live on and more positive use of artificial intelligence to improve our world. Those two things you suggest we could focus on. How do you respond?
For a scientific purpose, for the nature of expansion, that would be better. That would be a better focus than what you're focusing on now, because the nature of the scientific community at this point is focusing on continuing things exactly as is, which isn't helpful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, so that's pretty much all we have for the chapters. There's a wonderful afterword in this book. There's a photo, and the afterword is written by Stephen's daughter, Lucy. And this is such a beautiful scene that she described. And if you would bear with me, I would like to read it. On the bleak grayness of a Cambridge spring day, we set off in a cortege of black cars towards the great St. Mary's Church, the university church where distinguished academics by tradition have their funeral services. Out of turn, the streets seemed muted. Cambridge looked empty. Not even a wandering tourist in sight. The only spikes of color came from the blue flashing lights of the police motorcycle outriders guarding the hearse with my father's coffin in it, stopping the sparse traffic as we went. And then we turned left and saw the crowds massed along one of the most recognizable streets in the world, King's Parade, the heart of Cambridge itself. I have never seen so many people so silent. With banners, flags, cameras, mobile phones held aloft, the huge numbers of people lining the streets stood in quiet respect as the head porter of Gonville and Caius, my father's Cambridge college, dressed ceremonially in his bowler hat and carrying an ebony cane, walked solemnly along the street to meet the hearse and walk it to the church. My aunt squeezed my hand as we both burst into tears. He would have loved this, she whispered to me. Since my father died, there's been so much he would have loved, so much I wish he could have known. I wish he would have seen the extraordinary outpouring of affection towards him coming from all around the world. I wish he could have known how dearly loved and respected he was by millions of people he had never met. I wish he had known that he would be interred in Westminster Abbey between two of his scientific heroes, Isaac Newton and Charles Darwin, and that as he was laid to rest in the earth, his voice would be beamed by a radio telescope towards a black hole. Now I was buzzing like crazy even reading that. And I knew I wanted to read it at the end because anyone who might have known Stephen, who might be watching this and who might have read this book, I would like for you to respond to what your daughter wrote there about wishing that you knew all those things and saw all those things.
I think she knows by now that she honored my wishes. She knows I love her. She knows beyond what I could ever know. And of course, I experienced everything that she wished that I would, right away.
Well, that's all the questions I have today from the book. And I guess I just want to know if you have any final things to say, final thoughts.
Never stop questioning.
Thank you so much for taking the time out to be with all of us here today. I've enjoyed reading your book. I've enjoyed hearing you now. And I stand with all of those other people in great admiration for you and the others of the A-team as well. Thank you and bless you.
Thanks, Candace.
Pamela, this was simply amazing. How's your spine feeling right now?
It's strangely enough really, really calm. It's probably the best that it's ever felt. Yeah, so there's a lot of progress being made this morning.
Great. Well, maybe after the channeling, you'll continue to make progress there and feel top-notch by the end of the day, or certainly by the end of the week.
I have that feeling, yeah, over the course of the next couple of days.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you all for watching, whether live or in the future. That makes me laugh now saying that, right? Everything's a joke. Thank you so much, Pamela. I love you. Blessings to everybody. Bye-bye.